Welcome to the Indie Writer Podcast, where we talk all things writing and indie publishing. Today we are excited to be talking about the post-publication Letdown with James Tate Hill, Renée K. Nicholson, and Megan Culhane Galbraith. James Tate Hill is the author of a memoir, Blind Man's Bluff, released August 3rd, 2021 from W.W. Norton. His fiction debut, Academy Gothic, won the Nilsen Literary Prize for a first novel. His essays were notable in the 2019 and 2020 editions of Best American Essays. He serves as a fiction editor for Monkeybicycle and contributing editor for Literary Hub, where he writes a monthly audiobooks column. Born in Charleston, West Virginia, he lives in North Carolina with his wife. Megan Culhane Galbraith is a writer, visual artist, and adoptee. She is the author of The Guild of the Infant Saviour, an adopted child's memory book, a hybrid memoir-in-essays published by Mad Creek Books, Ohio State University Press. Her work was notable in Best American Essays 2021 and 2017, and her writing and art has been published or is forthcoming in HYPERALLERGIC, Bomb, The Believer, Tupelo Quarterly, Hobart, Longreads, Hotel Amerika, Catapult, and Redivider, among others. She is a graduate of and the Associate Director at the Bennington Writing Seminars and the Founding Director of the Governor's Institutes of Vermont Young Writers Institute. Renée K. Nicholson is the author of the poetry collections Roundabout Directions to Lincoln Center and Postscript, and co-editor of the anthology Bodies of Truth, Stories of Illness, Disability, and Medicine. She serves as director of the Humanities Center at West Virginia University. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for coming. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
So why don't we start out? Maybe we could all just talk about our latest books and when they came out. So Renée, do you want to share?
Sure. So I just had a book that came out 31st, 2021, called Fierce and Delicate, Essays on Dance and Illness. So right when things were sort of opening up COVID-wise, but nobody really knew, and kind of the whole editorial process through COVID land, which, I'm sure my colleagues here will have some thoughts on as well. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Megan, let's hear about your latest book.
Sure. My book is The Guild of the Infant Saviour, an adopted child's memory book. It came out on May 21st, and it's a hybrid narrative that includes my visual art. And again, too, sort of coming out of the pandemic, I've been getting very good at Zoom events. So.
And yeah, James, I know yours came out in August. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. August 3rd. And I'm still in the thick of it. I think my online tour, I did have 2 in-person events, one of which was where I met Renée in person for the first time at WVU just, a week and a half ago. And that was my second in-person event. And I think I've finished, for the time being anyway, all the in-person events, but I'm still excitedly doing podcasts like this one and still writing things and still, so I guess in regard to the letdown, I alter that to come down. I'm sort of, the adrenaline is starting to subside, but the post-publication blues haven't really kicked in for me yet, though there's definitely peaks and valleys.
I feel like no one told me about these post-publication blues. I knew about just from Courtney Mom's book, she talks about it in there, but I think this is what I've been experiencing these last few months. I just kind of shuffle around my apartment thinking, wow, I did one thing today. I guess I should be proud of that, because I don't have the energy to I can't even, I can barely think about writing my next book, which I'm really excited about, but I'm glad actually now to have this thing labeled as like postpartum book depression. I feel like it's a little bit of that,
So I really prepared myself for an anticlimactic launch day. I think because of Anne Lamott's book, Bird by Bird, where she talks about on her launch day, she and her friend who shared a publication date, I think sent each other flowers and just called each other and laughed hysterically. And that was it. She expected, balloons and something to happen. And so I really prepared myself for that feeling. And I think because I prepared myself for that, I didn't experience it so much. I made a lot of plans. I got a little bit obsessed with preparing it. I named these specific goals and I tried to celebrate each milestone leading up to it because I knew that was the process. So, when it went up on Amazon, I celebrated. And when my friend saw it available at her library, I celebrated each little thing. But I didn't realize that the actual letdown now, I think, is more after that day. And so what was the actual launch day like for each of you? Maybe we can start there.
It doesn't even feel like there was an actual launch day. It's certainly because you get your books ahead of time, so that sort of feels like it. But I was still, not quite quarantined in my house, but definitely not out and about. I do have to credit. I'm working with a publicist, and she sent me cookies with the picture of my book on them, these sugar cookies, which looked really awesome. And I was like, I don't know if they're going to taste good, but I have to say, I don't know where she found them, but they were delicious. So there was a lot of self-celebration at my house with me and my husband and the dog. So but it did kind of take a different rhythm. There wasn't a day that felt like launch day. I did an event kind of early on, mid-June, with some other West Virginia University Press authors. That's where Fierce and Delicate is at. And that was nice, but it didn't feel launchy. So I think I kind of just feel like we skipped over that part and it went directly from new book to old book.
Yeah.
I don't know. But people did try. I did get, I have to be and especially some writer friends. I had some really nice writer friends that were just hey, so excited to read your book. Hey, this is a big deal. Or pushing things out on Twitter, and you see it and you just feel oh, there's the love, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think one email that made it really, somebody who works at Inkshares, Noah Broyles, sent me this beautiful email, and I don't know him at all, but he sent me an email that said, I know that there's only one day when a debut author publishes her debut novel, and that's today. And I was like, okay, here we are. It's a day.
So exciting. I remember, launch day, because I kind of read Courtney Mom's book and I was like, okay, this is going to be my Bible for before and during and after. And she said, do something for yourself. Right. So I went into New York City. I had been this was, of course, my first book, and I kind of burned myself out. I just wasn't ready for all the new things I had to learn, how to do graphics in Canva and how to promote yourself in a very uncomfortable way, in a way that I, this just felt this onslaught of me. And I'm not like that. I hope I'm not. And I kind of had a first, it's sort of a breakdown. And I was I just have to drop out for a minute. And I went to see my high school friend, my dear high school friend in New York City. And we spent a long weekend running around New York because we finally could. It was just open, and we had dinner and talked about stuff that wasn't about the book, and just, got lost on the subway and had so much fun. And it was just the best. And at the same time, to your point, Renee, people were sending me lovely emails and texts and, supportive things on social media. And so it felt so full of love for me at a time when I was, kind of quite terrified because I didn't know what I was doing. I still don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, for me, it was strange because I think Renee, you said there's so many different phases before the book even comes out. Not least of which is the book actually arriving in readers' hands before launch day.
Yeah.
And I think it was, a full week, maybe even 10 days before my publication day that people were posting Twitter pictures of my book in, here's Blind Man's Bluff in Times Square, Barnes & Noble, or wherever it was in New York. And I'm like, whoa, that's really cool. I didn't know that was legal. But I guess there's no Harry Potter embargo on spoilers for memoirs. But yeah, so I mean, there's all those little lead up things, and plus I had been doing publicity stuff since basically the end of my spring semester, and writing essays and shortening chapters to publish as excerpts, and I've probably written somewhere between like 20 and 25% of the length of my book's word count in promotional stuff. And so that was still going well after the launch days. But Lori, my wife, has been so great. It's like, you can't cook tonight. We have to celebrate this. And I'm like, we just celebrated something yesterday.
Yeah.
We have groceries we have to use. But it was the Monday before my launch day. And so I was, it's like Christmas Eve, and you're all like, oh, what's Santa going to bring me? And that was when somebody tagged me. Everything I learn about, I get tagged on Twitter. And so somebody tags me in the Dwight Garner New York Times review. And I'm like, certainly they wouldn't tag me if it was a bad review. And this was like Monday at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. launch day eve. And so that was, like sobbing at my computer in joy.
Oh,
and
great.
That was so surreal. And so that one we definitely went out for. And then I did an online conversation with my agent, who's just so lovely in every way. And it was my launch night event, which was nice not to have to leave the apartment. So I don't even remember what we did for dinner, but it must have been something like takeout-y or something fast. But yeah, so it was definitely like pajama launch, as opposed to, the pre-pandemic times when we were all, let's put on our fanciest evening wear.
Yeah, that's the best though. Pajama launch. Do you guys think, I don't know about you, but I got so nervous. I was just telling my boss this today. I feel like I've come so far in the 6 months since the launch of this book, because I would get so nervous for events. Like my launch event was with Jenny Booley, and I was just like, oh my God, I have to I was studying for a test or something. And, I was terrified. I was like, oh, she's like, I got you, girl, don't worry. And now I'm like, oh, it's really just about talking about your book. Like, I wrote this thing, I should be able to talk about it. I don't know why I wore myself out thinking that, but there's sort of at least for me as a debut author, there was this terror that came with, I don't want to look stupid, and I don't want people to think I look dumb in front of these Zoom events that would draw, 40, 50 people. Whereas if I was in person, I would be lucky probably to get 4,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
sure.
it's wonderful that way. But I think Zoom, I don't know about your experience, but Zoom, I feel like gave me more exposure, or these online events gave my book more exposure, and I'm so grateful for that, and to everybody who read it, and wrote to me.
I think the timing of mine might have been a little different, because mine was the end of August, and I think people were really excited to have something in person to go to, at least right here. And so I've had more like 3 or 4 people come to my Zoom events, but I had a packed house at my in-person launch, which I was not expecting.
That's so fantastic.
It actually made me really nervous because I thought it was going to be like my very close family and friends. And then it was like the first person who I didn't know came up to me and asked me to sign a book. And I was like, oh, I have to think of like a thing to write to someone I don't know. Like I had not even considered it. And so I just had to come up with my signing phrase on the spot. So I think the timing made mine a little different.
I did the same thing. I was just at the Montclair Lit Fest. It was the first in-person event, and people were asking me to sign their book. I'm like, oh, I did not plan this. I don't know what to say.
Yeah. And I was shaking
Yeah, exactly.
Renee, I wanted to ask, Megan asked about jitters. I'm curious if all your many years of performing for large audiences as a professional ballet dancer, does that confidence in front of a crowd translate to writing? I mean, not to the writing, but to the presenting your writing?
Right. So I actually have, enough performance anxiety in both venues that you think I would have better strategies. But I guess I'm really good at hiding it because most people are like, oh, you're so confident. And I'm like, yeah, I'm so not. But I think my role in WVU's Humanity Center has really helped me because I've been on the other side. Like when Megan was saying, oh, I got you, girl, like I'm now that person, and I do a lot of Q&As being the question asker. And I know as the question asker, I'm really just trying to present people's like super awesome coolness. And so now I just trust that that's what's going to happen to me. Maybe that's naive. But, yeah, I mean, it's interesting though. The thing about dancing is typically you're on a stage and there are footlights. So the audience is just one great blob. And you're typically doing it with other people. Even when you have solo parts, it's part of a larger thing. And one of the hardest transitions to writing was you could see everyone and they could see you and you could look eye to eye, and there was no blob. It was, very real in that way. And so that took a little getting used to be honest. But that's a really good question. I wish I could say like, yes, professional training as a performer, but I think other people see that in me way more than I see it in myself.
Speaking of seeing people or like being right near your audience, what I found is that since I've talked about how my novel has a lot in common with parts of my own autobiography, and I'm sure as memoir authors you get this too, people want to talk to me about really personal things. Then I want to say like, no, like I wrote it down because that's how I wanted to express this, not because I wanted to have personal conversations with strangers. That's why I wrote it. That's why I fictionalized it.
Yeah, it's nice to make a difference, but it is for anybody who's writing about, let's say, trauma, in the big sense of the word. You get people unsolicited telling you about their trauma. Like I have my friend Haley calls them trauma dumpers. It's like they don't want a response, they want to be heard. But so it's just you nod and I'm sorry that happened to you. But it's a lot. Like if I had to learn boundaries, right? JT, I bet you have similar things. And I wanted to hear about you in terms of audiences, like, and seeing them or not,
that's the one thing my eyes do well is block. Just blur the ever-loving hell out of a big crowd. And it's my nerves come not from that, but for years there was just residual nerves in front of an audience for my first book, even though with Academy Gothic, it was a novel, but my protagonist was legally blind. And so I had, in ways, started talking about that publicly for the first time. I was still very nervous about doing my Cyrano method of reading with my earbuds and basically reciting or performing the digital voice in my ear into my own speech. And so the flaws of that, it was very much performance anxiety because it wasn't just getting up there and reading. It was having to hit my marks and cues and all that stuff. And so there was the anxiety of that. And it took until, maybe 8-10 events for that book before the anxiety started to go away. And I don't have much now. And a big part of it is because I'm no longer trying to hide anything unintentionally or intentionally. But I did still, have to invest in some Pepto before some of these Zoom events.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about, there is, first for me, there was this terror about there's one thing to write about what I was writing about, which is adoption and early attachment trauma and whatnot. And then there's another thing to speak it, so there's writing your voice and there's using your voice. And what I've found now is that I feel so much stronger in using my voice, even through some of the trauma that happened post-publication, with with my family reacting negatively to this memoir and whatnot, I've gotten so much stronger in myself, I think. And I wonder, both Renée and JT, what you feel about, like, and I don't use this word lightly, but the catharsis of acknowledging, the trauma, acknowledging to the world what that means. I felt kind of a catharsis to people resonating with my story, and I bet you guys did too.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much, Megan. And a couple of things kind of surfaced when my book came out. The first was, I had a lot of colleagues who knew I was once a dancer, and I'm knocking on 50 right now, right? I turned 49 in December, and I look different. I mean, not that I don't have some dancer qualities, but I don't look like my dancer self anymore. And when they read my book, they were like, holy cow, like I knew you were a dancer, but you were like a dancer. And that was weird because I was like, I didn't make this up.
Yeah.
And then, to also read about like how that like had a, serious break when I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And, I'd had some people tell me how they thought I should write about rheumatoid arthritis, and it was not at all the experience that I had. And so I pushed back on that a lot. And it's really interesting to see how people react to, but like, oh my gosh, it was taken away from you. And I'm like, yeah, you've known me a while. It's weird that it has been people that, I think know me fairly well, but I think also that like owning that voice, for me, it really came right, like there's a split at 2 parts of the book, and there's an essay, it's the second one in the second part called In Sickness, where I'm like a little salty about like how I'm going to talk about illness because I don't want to be told. I don't want it to follow like some prescripted, this is how you write about trauma, illness, whatever. Like this was my experience of it. And I'm going to own that. And I've had weird pushback on that. And I'll be interested to hear from you guys too, the things that you've had weird pushback about. But I've also had a lot of people that's their favorite part of the book.
Yeah.
They feel like it's real.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that part of the book too. And yeah, that's the thing, is this would be different if we were all doing nonstop in-person events, because people are far shyer on Zoom. I mean, nobody can come up to you and bend your ear for those awkward 20 minutes after a Zoom event, the way that, I've heard stories of people doing. And you're grateful for people connecting with your work, but
yes,
you do sort of become representative of your subject matter.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets odd in a few different ways. One of them is when, like you just said, Renée, somebody doesn't connect precisely with your experience or your lived experience. And, I'm encountering, and I'm trying so hard not to look, and I've sworn off Goodreads, thank God. But I've noticed like on Amazon, customer reviews, which I'm also trying not to look at, but, I'm like checking, they put some blurbs up, or, pull quotes from reviews, and, let's just mosey down to the bottom of the page and see what's there. And like, who the
yes. Oh my God.
And I see some, Megan, you should tell your story of this if you're comfortable telling that. But but I'll see somebody is like, this is just the most frustrating story. I don't know why he would feel shame about blindness or disability. And it's just so frustrating why he wouldn't acknowledge it. And I was like, that's kind of the middle of the book. I hope you felt frustrated. I also hope you read the final chapters where, that's where we killed the shark.
Yeah. God, I know. Well, to those Amazon reviews, like I was told by everyone, like, don't ever go read any reviews.
Yeah.
So I didn't, I haven't. And then a friend of mine texted me. She's like, hey, I went to leave you a review. And she's like, I saw this she's like, I saw this 1-star review from quote unquote a relative. And she knows my story about my sister, who's also adopted, who has reacted very negatively to anything I write, whether it's just anything I write. And she reacted very negatively about the publication of the book. But she wasn't even in it to begin with, you know? And so here I go to my cousin, then screen captured it for me and sent it to me. And I was just like, oh my God, this is my sister. Obviously she's using the same language. So one of the things that I've been doing that is cathartic for me is based on my family's negative reaction. Like the 4 people who are closest to me in adoption are the 4 who've reacted the most negatively about me using my voice, which I think is the story of many people now that I hear about adoptees using their voices. And so I've been like, to kind of diffuse the bomb of that sort of grief that, like, I had intense grief about this, you know, you're abandoned by your family after you write about abandonment. So I've just been speaking right into that pain as much as possible, because I think it's important from the standpoint of being a writer of memoir, and also for, you know, being an adoptee. And so I put her 1-star review on Twitter and just said like, hey, this is what happens sort of like when adoptees use our voices. And I didn't mean it to be like in some sort of victim-y way, but it got so much traction and positive, you know, feedback that it really helped to kind of share that pain.
Well, it helped emotionally, I'm sure, but the cool thing was I saw in that thread, people were buying your book as a result of that tweet.
They were. I know. I was like, oh my God, I got to do this more often.
One of our writing block friends, one of our biggest community members, our most active community members, Tahani Nelson, uses a 1-star review of her series that says, there should have been a warning that the protagonist was gay. She uses that as an ad, and she says it's her most successful ad, this 1-star review. So,
oh my God, wait, so you guys, I had an actor from like one of my favorite shows, Tales from the Loop. He like he's like, now I really want to read your book now. I'm going to go buy your book. And so I DM'd him and I was like, dude, don't buy my book. I'll send you one. Like, this is great. He's like, no, I want to support your art. And I was like, oh my God, this community is amazing, right?
That's amazing. Megan, I feel like I need to have you on for another topic, because I've had certain family members who felt defensive, who felt like I did not own the family story to use as a basis for my novel. Yeah. And they're going to be even happier when my WVU book comes out, because that's actually nonfiction. It includes part of the story. So,
yeah. Oh my God, I'd love to talk, because this is
I want to talk to you about that at some point.
You know, I think too, like, community is so important. You know, one of the communities that really has been supportive of me are other dancers who are writers, and talk about like the gift, right?
Yes, and I love that book.
That, you know, I just am thinking about like Renée K, which if you're a former dancer and you love dogs and your name is Renée, you're probably turned into a writer, is what we've decided.
I love Renée. She was an editor of mine at Essay, and she's
fantastic.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. And so, you know, folks like her and Jenny Blum and others that are coming to my mind right now, and who I ask for forgiveness, but they've been a huge bolster to my confidence, you know, just putting the book out there, because so much of what comes out of dance are like famous dancers, right? And so like, I was never going to be a famous dancer, even if I didn't have RA and everything. Like, that was, you know, not my trajectory. And so, you know, but the 1-star review thing is interesting, because you have to wonder about the kind of spitefulness behind that, and then the goodwill of others to like be like, okay, you know, let's use this as a positive. And it speaks to the cultural shift. I mean, there was a time that you would never have that kind of access to somebody who writes a book, but now it's almost expected. that you have a personal relationship with every person who reads your book. That's a lot.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point. You're like, I think JT said, you're sort of now a spokesperson for, so that's interesting. JT, what about your 1-star reviews? Have you had any?
Yeah, I got one last week, but here's the thing. It wasn't, I'm sure there's some on Goodreads. I haven't looked. Maybe they've offered comments, but on Amazon, I just noticed that early last week, my rating took a hit, as if I care, which I do, but I don't, but I do, but I don't.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it said that there was a 1-star rating, but there was no review attached. It was just like a drive-by rating.
Oh,
and so
God.
So I'm speculating, like, who could have done this? Was it somebody that I blocked on Twitter for being a dick? Was it somebody who's in the book who doesn't like the way they're portrayed? Was it a friend of somebody who's in the book? I don't know. The mystery will remain, but I didn't even know you could leave a rating on Amazon without, justifying it with a word or two.
Yeah. Right. The shipping sucked. It didn't come in time.
Yeah, right. And then you get the 1-star review, which reflects on you, but it doesn't reflect on you. You didn't ship anything out, right?
I got a 1-star review on Goodreads for Academy Gothic, and the person said that they bought it at AWP, and they went to my publisher's table, Southeast Missouri State University Press, and somebody at the table said, "Oh, you might like this novel. It has ghosts in it," and there are like references to ghosts, but it's satirical and there's not actual ghosts. And the guy hated. He's like, I was told there were ghosts in this book, and there are no real ghosts in this book. 1 star.
Listen, I'm going to tell you this because I always feel like podcasts, like we're just talking to each other. So I'm going to tell you. I woke up one day to my Facebook page where my ex-husband's girlfriend, we're not even friends on Facebook, had posted 15 like negative emoji faces, angry emoji faces on every listing about my book. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is happening?
Oh, no.
It's like Stranger Things were in the Upside Down or something. I was like, what's happening here? What's going on? People, like, we can have an honest conversation about how you feel. It's okay.
And the deep irony is that any kind of rating or review negative brings visibility to the book.
I know.
And also Lauren Huff is always amazing at, taking down trolls, and people will reply to her with like, I hated this about your book. She's like, well, thanks for buying it anyway.
Exactly. Thanks for reading. Request it from your library.
JT, I know on Twitter you mentioned that you'd been warned about the 2-month slump after publication.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the 2-month slump?
Yeah, and that's where I'm like, maybe I'm just so prepared for it that it hasn't really kicked in, or I've had peaks and valleys over the last couple of months where, you're like asking yourself, have I done everything I should have done? Am I doing enough? Is it over now? Is this where the come down begins? But yeah, Erica Swiler, who's a really good friend, was the first to warn me of this and said, plan to do something really nice for yourself after the 2-month mark. But now, as I sort of am at that point, I'm like, I don't know what that would be. Like, for me, doing something nice for myself is like, watching Miami Vice on Roku. Which I would do anyway.
Right.
And so it's not really special. Or like, oh, let's just listen to 80s music all day, which is, again, a typical Thursday. It's not really in the budget to go somewhere great. Not that I would want to during the pandemic anyway. And then there's like, well, do I eat a whole bunch of bad food, which, again, already done.
I depression bought this sweater that looks like a bag.
Yeah, I'm so out of, as a writer who's never really been of means, I don't really have practice in, what's treating the word, yourself. Luxuriating. Yeah.
It's so
open
true.
to ideas.
And like you mentioned, especially during COVID, for me, I've gotten into the habit of if there's something nice I can do for myself, I just do it because look what we're living through. I deserve it anyway. So it's hard to think of something particularly special to do.
I've been ordering my groceries to have them delivered, which is like the big luxurious thing that I did for myself during the whole. And I understand how much of a privilege that is.
It's not too bad. We never went the delivery route, but I do all our grocery list making and shopping and cooking. But the our local chain, for only $4.95, you do the pickup. So they do all the shopping and putting it in the bag, and you just arrive, you hand them your debit card, and they put it in your trunk. Yeah, so it's really just $5, and then the delivery is only $15. So it's cheaper than the upcharge for Grubhub, which is like, I'm very much my grandmother's grandson. I would hang out with her during summers growing up and go to the grocery store and the mall and Kmart and Hex and Hills and all those discount department stores. And I learned the value of $1 that way. And I also didn't get an allowance until I did chores. And so I was very aware of what things cost. And so Lori will be like, "You're so frugal." And I'm like, I'm just aware of what things should cost. Yeah. And so when I balk at the price of something at the grocery store, she's like, "It's not 1986. This is just what it costs."
Oh my God. So I used to shop for clothes, and I was like, my price point was $19.99 for literally till like 5 years ago. And then I was like, oh God, you can't get anything for that right now.
Right. And I think there's probably something to be said for the fact that we come from Appalachia and a culture of frugality. Yeah.
My grandparents were, Polish immigrants in Depression era, children. And I grew up shopping in thrift stores. I remember one time we went into the Goodwill, which was next to the body shop that he owned, because we go there and just work and play with my uncles and learn how to gap a spark plug and stuff. And he would walk us into the Goodwill. And one time he just like opened his arms out and he was like, "Anything you want, girls, put it on my tab." And it was like, we all walked out there. It was like $3. And I had a Woodstock, and I had a bird cage. It was just fabulous. That's how I grew up and I would, if I had to do back to school shopping for my kids, I'm like, we're going to the Salvation Army first. If you can't find it there, then I guess you won't have pants.
My husband's heart is big because he's an accountant. So he's like, yes, good job, guys. And he taught me all about unit price when grocery shopping. Yeah. And so then I got banned from grocery shopping because I wasn't doing it right. So I appreciate all this very much. But I think that point about Appalachia, and I know like for me, teaching students from West Virginia, from the region, I think about those things and even just things like course planning, like, okay, how much are all these books? Can you get them used at a reasonable price? Like, one of the things, GT was here and a bunch of students bought his book. We almost sold out of your book at the bookstore, JT. And
that's so cool.
Not required of them, but I have had students from across all the disciplines, and especially occupational therapy students and leadership studies students have talked about how transformational his reading was for them. And so I think one of my strategies is, promoting other people whose books are coming out. There are several that are part of our series, and then just some friends, like my friend Keegan Lester, who I taught as an English 101 student way back in the day and convinced to take a creative writing class. His memoir is coming out. And so new books are something that I've really just kind of poured myself into. And especially if I can find that like connection to West Virginia, since that's, my little slice of what I can help promote. And I think that buoys me a lot. And that really makes me feel like I'm part of a bigger community.
I love this. people talk about like Twitter takedowns and all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like such a good circle of friends that maybe it's because I don't engage in some of the discourse, quote unquote, because it's to me, it's just like, I don't want to read somebody else's hot take because it sounds like a steaming pile of poo. But nobody needs that. Like if I'm going to write about something, I want to think about it deeply and have conversations with friends so like the literary community that I've found is so wonderful. The freaking literary world's hard enough as it is. Like it's rife with rejection. You have to persist through, everything. And you need people, we need each other.
Yeah, I don't think there are many people who can be harder on a writer than we already are on ourselves during the writing process. So it's just, you have to seek out those people who are, and it's not like you're looking for people who are going to snow job you on, the quality of your work. But I think this is something that has to be unlearned from some graduate programs, or maybe just from human nature, where at some stage you realize you're only in competition with yourself and the story that you're trying to tell.
JT, I literally say that to prospective students. I'm like, the only person you'll be competing with here is yourself. And that's the only person that matters because it's hard enough,
Yeah.
So to change gears a little bit, I listened to Dan, what is his name? Dan something, 10% Happier podcast. I can't believe his name slipped my mind, but it's a meditation podcast. And Josh Radnor, who played Ted on How I Met Your Mother, who I would not have expected to be a meditation practitioner, but apparently is, went on and spoke a lot about his personal practice and how, especially after he finishes a new project, the first thing people want to ask him is, what's next? What's next? What's next? So I'm wondering if part of your post-publication experience has been like moving straight into the next project, or if you, like Radnor, maybe want to sit in the doneness a little bit, and what's been more helpful for you?
That is such a good question.
Yeah.
I feel like my next project sort of organically arose, like on a writing sort of thing. And that's how it kind of tends to be with me. But I also feel like, and Megan, maybe you can speak to this too, like my day job kind of takes over. So some of my like getting past the book is like, oh, well, I got to have a speaker series and I got to run some grants and I got to, do some other things like that. So it's a weird, like, I think what is happening to me is like, I haven't been able to think about like the kind of post-book depression as much because I'm being pulled in all these other directions. But the next thing does feel like, I think my whole life I've felt like I'm never quite going to get there. And so I'm always like, I must sit down and write. When am I going to find time to write? Oh my gosh, my calendar is a disaster, And Megan, I know you also balance an administrative role, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Oh God. I feel like I'm in this kind of weird, I know exactly what I want to write for my next book. Ironically, I had the opportunity, a friend of mine asked if I could house sit for her in New York City. She has a brownstone of all things. So I went down thinking, okay, I have these two ideas for books. Whichever one I come away with after thinking about it for this week is going to be the one I write. And lo and behold, it's the one I never expected to write. But at the same time, I'm in this weird funk. Like I got a good essay out of it. I'm working with like two of my favorite writers on our books in general, but I cannot, what I need to do, and this is going to be the weird part of the podcast, is where I say, I've consulted a tarot reader. And she said, and this is legitimate, like, I need to just stop doing. I need to stop doing. And it's so hard for me, and probably for everybody in these frames, to like, I don't know what that means. What does that mean? Like, I literally have arthritis in my thumb. The doctor's like, stop making things, stop typing. I was like, I don't know what to do with myself. And so, yes, I mean, I have administrative duties, and I'm so excited to like invite writers to campus and to assemble this next class and do all that, you know. And so I guess I'm just trying to ramble on and say, like, I don't know what I'm doing right now. I know what I want to write. I'm scared to talk about it because I don't want to diffuse it. If you'll see in the background, you'll see my like super witchy altar at which I like
love it.
Pull tarot cards, and I'm like, please tell me what to do. I'm just in this like really squishy space, and maybe it's menopause. I like am squeaky and crying all the time. I don't know. You guys are really learning a lot about me.
I'm really glad you could bring up menopause, because I'm like the same. I'm like, is it post-book depression? Is it hot flashes in the middle of the night?
I know. I walked around here yesterday. I was like, okay. I said to my boss today, I was like, okay, I'm going to improve my style. I'm going shopping. I'm going to dress better. I'm going to level up. And I said, and meanwhile, I'm standing here in Blundstones, leggings, and a ratty old sweatshirt. You know, I'm like, good job, Megan. Good job. But yeah.
Well, this crosses a conversational item off my bucket list, is to talk menopause with Megan, who is my fellow Golden Girls friend. And
I love Golden Girls.
Megan sent. Tell me this isn't the greatest Christmas present ever. She sent us a Christmas present 2 or 3 years ago. I don't know what time is anymore, but 2 or 3 years ago, it was the special Golden Girls edition of Trivial Pursuit. It's just all and I have seen most episodes. But it was just me against Lori. But I will say, out of 6 questions on every card, I probably only actually knew 2 of them, and the rest was just, they were really hard.
Well, what you see on my altar here, right? So I have 3 like prayer candles. One of them is rose.
Excellent.
I got Lori the
every time Betty White trends on Twitter.
Oh, I know. Every time it's her birthday.
Megan, I got Lori totally into the themed candles. I'm working on a novel, a romance right now, and so I have my meet cute candle. So I totally believe in the power of candles.
Yep. I have them everywhere. It's like
my son is going, power of candles.
Hey, in the background helps. That's the thing.
Yeah. Right. So maybe we should talk about, do we have any concrete strategies or advice for people who either have a book coming out soon or are in the slump themselves, the letdown or the come down, or is the advice just kind of, this is what happens when none of us know what we're doing?
I will sort of combine that with because I managed to escape the what's next question there. And I started querying Blind Man's Bluff in January of 2018. And so it was, I did the math. I think it's like 21 months of querying before I found my agent. But it was kind of deceptive because I was revising all along that time if I would get any kind of feedback, and then I'd pass it off to a new beta reader who I guess was then more like a delta or an epsilon reader or something. But it was lots of tweaking along the way. But I kind of thought the memoir was more or less done in late 2017, early 2018, and so I was querying it because I thought it was done. And I started a new novel in May of that year, and I finally got it ready for readers in June, summer of 2020. And that was when I got first reader feedback. But another year went by because, constantly there was, all along that process, there was memoir revisions or memoir tweaking. And then once the memoir sold, I had notes from my editor, notes from Eric, my agent, before we sent it out. And so there was just constantly working on 2 things in different stages. And it made it easier because I I never gave up on the memoir and finding an agent, but I did start to settle in during the later stages of the agent search, where I was like, I'm probably not going to find an agent for this, but I want it to be as good as it can be when it gets published with some small press somewhere. And so it was definitely always within arm's reach while I was writing this novel. So the long answer to the short question of what's next is I have a completed novel that I've gotten notes from my agent on, and who knows when I'll get a chance to revise, probably in the next few months, I guess. But that's my advice always, is especially when you're out on submission, is have something else that you're working on, or at least thinking about. But that is usually when you're, still up in the air with that one project. But when that project has already come out, which is where we all are now, it's a different sort of emotional space where you're trying to build from an emotional plateau.
Good advice. I think I want to tell, my advice, if I'm loath to give it, it's my first time through, but I didn't know the emotional and the physical toll of marketing your book. And in the pandemic, you're marketing it from the same room where you essentially wrote it, so treat yourself well, and I think I told JT this, early on, I had these expectations. I don't know why about my book, but I'd start seeing friends' books on these must read, read whatever, read this list, it's a very, and I was I had this stab of jealousy, and I was like, Megan, you got to sit yourself down and have a business meeting with yourself, because this is not your book. This is not what you should expect from your book. And there's no use being jealous or trying to compete in those ways, and once I realized what I wanted from my book, which the success of my book for me is the admiration from readers and people and other writers that I adore. The people who blurbed my book, my God, they're just, to me, I'm like, that's success right there, and so I feel like if you can put yourself in that mindset, the measure of your book, it should be a long-term measurement. It's not just 6 months after your publication, oh, that's it, that's all it's going to do. It should be a long-term kind of thing. And also your mental health is more important, and your physical health is more important than the success of your book or your anything, right?
Beautiful. That's just beautiful. And JT, I love, you're getting these edits from someone else. It's almost like a gift to be able to turn your attention that way. Right. And, Megan, to your point about having a business meeting with yourself, separating the business of books from the artistic pursuit of books. And that's so hard. It is so hard. Those pangs of envy hit us all. We're like, what did I do wrong that and some of it's just dumb luck. And some of it is just, other forces that have nothing to do with you. And that's hard to separate yourself from, all those things. So my advice to people are, well, one, I've been taking a lot of daily walks. I have some paths through a wooded area of a park near my house, and the park and I spend a lot of time together. And that's been really, really helpful to me, because I feel like I just let go, I just have found that place. And you're right, our space is all of a sudden condensed. So the place that you write and you create is also your business office. And that's a terrible way to have to be in the world. The other thing is if you're struggling, just admit that you're struggling. It's okay to struggle with it. We can't be the rock all the time that, is strong and unbreaking and all that. No, we have a gooey candy center. We gotta, admit to this. And that's actually where I think this, you kind of grow from the process. At least I hope. But if there's somebody listening who's really struggling, just find a way to contact me. I'll send you a card.
That's so nice, Renee. But it's so amazing. It's true. Like, this imposter syndrome is really, really hard. And I fully admit, like, I had a breakdown during like this whole process. It's just like, oh my God, and I'm so glad I have friends to have helped me through it, or just to know that if you need a break, take a freaking break. Just you don't have to get 500 likes on Twitter. That's not a measure of any success. You know what I mean? It's really not. I think there's quality over
Megan,
quantity.
To that point, the thing that gets me the most likes on Twitter are pictures of my dog.
I know. I talk about my butt or something, and it's like, I get 100 likes about my butt. I don't know. That's great. It's just that.
Right. I mean, it's like, you can't invest in that same way, knowing
exactly.
It's a tool, but it's not the end all be all. I totally, like, when you said that, I was like, yeah, my dog, I mean, she's an adorable golden retriever. She's super soft and lovely. And yes, everybody likes her on Twitter.
That's awesome.
Megan, you mentioned separating business you from author you, and that's so hard to remember, or so hard to do, but so important to do, because especially when we are in control of our book's fate in ways that we would like to think we're not. It's so much of marketing is just voodoo and luck, and you guys have both published your books, Guild of the Infant Saviour from Ohio State University Press, and Renee's Fierce and Delicate from WVU Press, both of which had a National Book Award nominee last year. So these are university presses, but that obviously know how to get their books in front of readers. But like my university press for Academy Gothic was basically 1.5 employees, and I got used very early, and I had a wonderful experience there, but some university presses are just very small. And actually, I think OSU and WVU are very small. They're just very, very mighty. But you get very used very early to knowing that you're going to be in control of your book's fate, and you have to generate all these things. And you think that the querying is done when you've either found a publisher or an agent or something, and then lo and behold, then you have to, start querying bookstores for events, and then you get rejections from bookstores for events, and you're like, I thought I was done with the rejections. But I mean, I have an amazing publicist at Norton now, and God bless every single thing she has done, and she has guided me along the way. But that doesn't make the anxiety go away, or the fact that she can say, would you like to pitch something for X, Y, or Z? And I'm like, oh, wow, that's amazing. And then we pitch it, and then it gets accepted. I was like, oh, shit, I got to write it. So you're still in control. I mean, you are author, but you are marketer. And no matter, unless you're one of like the 100 writers in America who actually make a living off their books, the Stephen Kings or the James Pattersons or whoever, you're always going to be still doing things to get your book's attention. And so, yeah, I mean, no wonder we're neurotic as hell.
For me, it's really been a coming to terms with realizing that I can't just keep waiting for some unknown thing to happen. I don't know what that thing is. So that's why I've really had to write. I actually wrote down like, okay, I want to sell 5,000 copies. I want to be in this bookstore. I want to like be asked to do this kind of workshop, like very specific goals, because otherwise I'm just going to be waiting and waiting for something to happen.
I will tell you, on the other side of a lot of those goals of mine being accomplished, like bucket list goals, never underestimate the ability of a writer to move the goalposts on a daily basis.
Exactly. That's why I had to write those down, because I was thinking, I realized I was in this space of waiting for something to happen. And I went back and I thought, like, what was my goal when I finished this book? And my goal was to have somebody I didn't know read it and like it. That was it. Yeah. And I met that. And then I have these goals and I was like, I'm going to write those down so that I can actually feel accomplished and not just keep moving, the goalposts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the agent question is such a good one because I'm writing a book that may, for the first time in my life, not be so niche-y, right? Like I kind of have a niche, I get these very kind of tight and so I'm like, well, do I look for an agent? I've had really good success on university presses. I worked on an edited book with Nebraska. It was a great experience. I worked on this book with WVU Press. So do I kind of stick in my, books of poetry on an independent press? So do I stick with that because I know that world and I'm comfortable and I've done well? I'm incredibly grateful. Or do I look for an agent for the next one? Is that the right thing to do for my book? And that's the question, what's the right thing to do for the next book? And that's the one thing the past book kind of teaches you about, but there's no roadmap from here.
Yeah. It's the same with writing. Yeah. I mean, each book, what is it they tell us? Each book teaches you how to write it while you're writing it. And I was like, first time I heard that, I was like, ooh, that sounds very wise. And then while you're writing the book, you're like, who's the asshole who said that? And then the question becomes, will I ever use that? What it taught me? Probably not, because the next book's totally different.
Yeah. Well, this has been really wonderful. Could each of you please share where to find you online, where to find yourself online?
I will go first because since I am probably on Twitter the most frequently. I'm just on Twitter at James Tate Hill, and you can find me on my website, jamestatehill.com.
I'm on Twitter at Megan Galbraith, and you can find me on my website at megangalbraith.com.
And I am on Twitter as SummerBooks1. But you can find me at my website, which is just reneenicholson.com.
And thanks for listening to the Indie Writer Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode and will subscribe to hear our future episodes. We want to thank the Writing Block community for their continued support. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, or at writingblock.com, no K. Remember to subscribe, share, and tell your friends. Thanks, everyone, and happy writing.